I have a couple of announcements. I'll show you the content that I added to the page for week 2. And then I'm going to go through the plot and some of the themes in the film Bronx Tale using a new page where I pasted all the relevant frames representing every scene and a lot of key moments in the story and key lines in the dialogue. And then my plan would be to show at least 2 sequences and discuss them with you, and if we don't have that much time, you can add a few notes to your Google Docs file now that you have one. Okay? So, what we had in the plans for next week at the Center for Italian Studies, of which I am the unworthy director, is a panel on Richard Gambino, who was a pioneer in the field of Italian-American studies and really established the first program in Italian-American studies at Queen's College, and then came to Stony Brook as a visiting professor during the 1990s. I was already here, and helped establish our own program in Italian-American studies, which right now is just a minor. Richard passed away last year, at the beginning of last year, and we invited other scholars who knew him, who were slightly younger, to talk about not just his contributions, but also the future of this field. As you can see, the event is scheduled for Wednesday of next week at 5 p.m. in the Center for Italian Studies, which is on the 4th floor of the library. And you can find more information in the announcement, including the promise of extra credit if you attend. However, because of the weather, we might cancel this panel. We'll have to decide by tomorrow at the center whether to proceed or not. One of the guests is coming from Chicago, so we don't want her to fly here for nothing. So, of course, you'll see it soon enough. You'll see whether this is canceled. I added more information about the event and also something that is relevant for this class. When the Godfather Part 1 film came out, that was March 1972. A month later, the article is from April 30th, when it was clear that The Godfather was a big success and a global success. Richard Gambino wrote a long piece for the New York Times entitled 20 million Italian Americans cannot be wrong, and I posted some excerpts, some considerations that are still relevant, still interesting. Of course, Richard Gambino's reaction was not entirely positive. He was afraid that the success of the film would encourage people to embrace stereotypical views of the Italian-American community. And at the same time, he was able to have this intuition that the success of the movie could be appropriated within the community in different ways. And this is something that happened with The Godfather already, and happened even more with The Soprano, the idea that, oh, you think that I, as an Italian-American, am associated with this phenomenon, then you should be respecting me. Then you should not be treating me as a second-class American citizen, right? So there are all sorts of possibilities. I created a Google Docs file for each student. You should have received yesterday the link to your file. This is the place where you will be submitting your assignments, the 4 written assignments and the final paper. So make sure to bookmark that link. Make sure you can open the file and edit the file, just type something on it, that'll be enough. If not, let me know and I can fix the issues. And of course, if you lose your link.
It sounds like you're giving instructions to students about submitting assignments. Here's a clearer, more organized version of your message, suitable for delivery.
Okay. Sorry that you will not hear a clearer and better organized version of this yet. But I was saying, if you lose the link, don't hesitate, just ask me and I'll send it back to you. And everything, remember, the readings that I put online that are not on this wiki because they're subject to copyright laws, and your page, your file for the assignments, they're all requiring the Stony Brook University login. So make sure you log in with your Stony Brook University email. Don't ask me to grant you access through your personal, your private email addresses, because of course there are policies and procedures about this. In regards to the assignments, just to review, there are 4 assignments based on themes that are broadly defined. So this is how you proceed with the assignments. First of all, the assignments don't have a deadline. The idea is, if you get inspired to write about one of those themes after a film, after a reading, after a combination of films, multiple films or multiple readings, you can write the assignment. Once you've posted the assignment in your Google Docs file and you're done with it, post a comment saying, I'm done with this assignment. You can review it, because I'll receive a notification through the system and I can go in, read it and leave my comments and a grade. The only temporal imposition, the only chronological limit that I put in the syllabus is that by the end of week 5 of the semester, you should post at least one of these assignments. Because this way, you'll be able to get feedback on it. Whereas if you do all of them the last day of the semester, or the last day before this file will be closed by the deadline of the paper, your Google Docs file, you wouldn't be able to see if you understood the instructions, if you are aligned with the spirit and the ideas of the class, etc. The assignments don't have to be done in this order, right? As I said, let your mind be stimulated and inspired to write. So keep in mind these. There are the basic elements of the schema, of the Machiavellian schema. There are basic themes that will recur in our discussions of readings and films. Once you think you have enough examples, enough ideas to discuss, you can go ahead and write your assignment on any of those topics. By the end of the semester, you need to have all 4 topics covered. And of course, there are more details in the syllabus. It should be a couple of pages, right? Make sure you include specific details and references from the films or reading that you're using to articulate your discussion, right? Try not to make it overly generic, okay? And let me know. Ask me questions about these assignments. I'm also trying to help you with this. So, for example, in the section about a Bronx Tale, I suggested that Bronx Tale would be good for topic number 1. Not exclusively, but by itself would be sufficient to talk about topic number 1. It could be used for number 2 or number 3 as well, but in the context of the treatment of additional materials, readings or films besides the Bronx Tale. So this is the expanded section devoted to a Bronx Tale under week 2, right? So the section existed already, I just added more material between yesterday and today. So in here you find where you can watch the film, you can find it on Amazon, and if you click in here, you get to justwatch.com that will show you other platforms where the film is streaming with prices. The prices usually are not up to date, but the indication of other streaming platforms is pretty accurate. You can also find a film such as A Bronx Tale in local libraries, probably this university library as well. Next, I added a file, a PDF file, where I placed all the frames, well, not all the frames, I placed about 3,000 frames from the film that I took at seconds of 1 to 2, at intervals of 1 to 2 seconds, with captions, so you can see the words associated with the frame. Because this gives you a chance, if you want to review any scene and see how it was shot, how the editing was made, where the lines were associated with images, right? What images were the lines associated with, etc. Okay, so it's not something that you have to use necessarily, but it's something that someone working with a film and someone in cinema studies would want to do, right? This is the surest way to analyze the visuals of a film. I added a script. This is not the shooting script, which I couldn't find, but it's pretty nice. It's a traditional script, right? Typewritten. Some of the characters' names are phonetics, right? So Calogero, let me show you. Calogero becomes Cologgio. I don't know if you can see that, right? Simply because they want people to read it how it sounds. Or his mother, Rosina, becomes R-O-S-E, when in fact in Italian there would be an I after the S, etc. Some of the characters' names were later changed, but most of the story is there, and it's very nice if you're curious to see an actual script. I don't know if you've ever seen an actual script. This was what was distributed to producers, to people interested in the film before they worked on it farther. And in case you want to use lines from the films instead of transcribing them, you can find the dialogue transcript in here. Okay, so these are just tools in case you want to work on a Bronx Tale for your written assignment. I added the Wikipedia article and the Internet Movie Database page, because there you can find things such as the actual locations, if you're interested in those things. Now, Jasper Minteri has a very interesting YouTube channel, and I added a bookmark here, and he talks about different things, his works, as well as the Italian-American community. Sometimes, of course, he mentions the mafia, the culture around the mafia. But if you want to know about the mafia from someone who belonged to it, in my mind, right now, the best YouTube channel would be the one by Michael Francis. Michael was in the mafia, spent many years in and out of jail, and eventually left his criminal life, and he has written about it, he has interviewed other members of the mafia, and he has very realistic descriptions of life and crimes that are committed in the criminal organizations. The next section includes this page that I will use today with frames that refer to every crucial scene actually in the film, and every crucial line. And then I added a few notes about the themes, and I'll see if I'm able to go through some of these notes myself today or next week. But I hope you can still find them useful, you can still look at them, and most of them probably should be clear enough to you. Okay? What else? I listed the scenes that we're watching today in case you want to see them again. And as usual, I'm working on, I did edit the video from Tuesday's class, only it hasn't posted yet. If you click on it, it says we're processing this video because last night YouTube was very slow, and this morning I left the house early, so I didn't have my computer on that was loading this. Okay, so here it is. Let me. Okay, and I hope I'll be able to use this keyboard. I'm not completely familiar with it, because it has a pad and various key combinations, and I don't have a lot of manual dexterity. The film starts with an interesting sequence. Can I have your attention? I don't think you need the computer now, right? Can we close the computers? Thanks. So it starts with an interesting sequence. It's not very unique, but it gives you a strong sense of what this film is about. It's a small film. It's not a great film. It's not original in terms of visual style or the way the story is brought to the screen, but certainly it's well made. It's a well-made movie. It was the first directed by Robert De Niro, who by then, 1993, is when the film came out, had been in that business for more than 20 years. So he had a sense of how to tell a story, a good story, that is the script by Chaz Palminteri, with the right visual elements. So the initial sequence starts with a view from above of the city and probably the Bronx, and then it zooms in to the smallest place where the film takes place. So it starts even before this with a view from above, and you hear Calogero's voice saying that the story takes place in the Bronx, and that the Bronx in 1960 was a world unto itself, right? It's a microcosm of New York, a microcosm of American society. Oh yeah. Right? From there, you're zooming in from above to the bell tower, and the bell tower, the church, is already suggestive of a microcosm, because you think church and you think what? What is the community surrounding a church? What's the word I'm looking for? Religion. It doesn't matter if you go or don't go to church. I don't go to church myself, but it's a parish, right? So already showing the church while zooming gives you the idea that this is not just a place, but it's also a community, a world unto itself, meaning that there are clear spatial but also social boundaries to this. And zooming into a specific corner to show you the signs, right? This is the corner of Belmont Avenue and East 187th Street, although the real epicenter of this world, of the story itself, is not this corner, is the corner across this street, across Belmont, because it's the corner where Sonny the mafioso hangs out. And that's really the pivotal point in terms of space for the story. Zooming in, we get to see the building, and specifically one of the windows of Calogero's family apartment. right? Calogero's last name is Anello, is the son of Rosina and Lorenzo, right? So we're getting into another microcosm, the family, right? And then specifically, the camera comes down from the window, doesn't go into the apartment, however, it goes into the stoop of the building, because this, as we will see, is the crucial place for the kid, Calogero. This is where the story will have its start, when Calogero, who's sitting on the stoop by himself, without his friends, will witness a murder. Sonny in the street, killing a guy who has attacked another mafioso. By the end of the movie, we'll see that the other mafioso is Carmine, played by Joe Pesci, and we understand why this happened. But in some ways, this is the space controlled by the kid, right? More than the apartment, which is the space for the family. This is the space for him and his friend. So a place he can call his own. And next, the camera goes down, now we're street level, and we see the corner I was referring before. So from the stoop, we see the other part of this duality, the corner across the street from the lamppost with the street signs, where Sonny is hanging out with Whispers, usually, and other members of the crew. Keep in mind, when you see the scenes or watch the movie, that in a realistic interpretation of what you see, not every man working for Sonny is a made member of the mafia, right? So Sonny is, Whispers, most probably his right-hand man, most probably is, but probably most of the others are just people who work around the actual gangsters, work for them, but they haven't reached the level of power and social status of made men, okay? And we'll see some of that in Goodfellas, right? This kind of hierarchy and how not everyone working for the mafia is in fact a mafia member. Being a member of the mafia is already, even at the lowest step, a privilege, right? And something that you need to work to achieve unless you're born in a family, etc. Following this first camera movement, the montage, the editing of the film, shows you a series of frames about the neighborhood. This is the descriptive premise. This is the setup, right? Every movie will have a setup. Sometimes it can be as short as 30 seconds, sometimes it can be 10, 15 minutes, but this is to set the premise of the story before the twist that starts the actual story, right? The storyline. So, for example, we see men on the side entrance, by the side entrance of the bar at the corner, and they're playing the lottery. And you have one of these criminals collecting bets and writing numbers, right? So they're showing that there is criminal activity in the neighborhood. However, it's 1960, it's a picturesque, mellow view of the social context. They're showing you a victimless crime, right? A clandestine lottery. You wouldn't think of it as an actual crime. You know how it works, do you? And some of these games still go on in neighborhoods, even in the city. Do you have any idea? And actually, you know that some of these kinds of lotteries started at the end of the Middle Ages, became very popular by the 16th century. In Italy, for example. What kind of lottery is this? How do you play? What do you have to do to win? Any idea? So you have to guess 3 numbers every day you can play, and the 3 numbers can be then, in order to assign the prizes, can be picked in different ways. Around this time, the most obvious thing would be, since betting on horse racing was big, The three numbers would have to do with the race bets on the day of, the last three numbers, because the little magazines that you get at the racetrack would publish how much was bet on a race, how much was bet the whole day at that racetrack, etc. So they would take the last three numbers of one of those things, right? So you have a guy who's collecting the numbers, you give them your money, the numbers you're betting on, and the next day, if you win, you can collect some money. And it was actually a good business for the mafia at that time, right? Because it was run in a lot of neighborhoods around the city. And of course, as you can imagine, a lot of poor people, even middle-class people bet in, and some of the biggest bets came from people who were poor or would borrow money to bet on these numbers, right? But in the film, you don't see a lot of actual blood and crime. So this is the adulterated view of the initial presentation of the neighborhood. There is the mafia. We know that there is a mafioso at the corner who's looking over things, possibly protecting people. And you know that there are some mafia-related business, but they seem to be inoffensive, innocent enough, right? This is the whole scene. You see the people, this is the side entrance to the bar, right? Because this is where some of the clandestine business takes place. People playing in the streets, a car to mark the period, must be a Ford Thunderbird. And as it is easy to notice, just men in this picture, it's 1960 in an Italian-American community. Women such as Rosina spend most of their time in the house. When they go out, it's just to go to the shops or go see people, right? So in a sense, by showing that this space is mostly inhabited by men, you can already have an intuition, a premonition of the fact that an environment heavily inhabited by men is one where violence or aggressions can take place, okay? Then you see the bus. This is the bus coming through Belmont Avenue, and of course it is the bus driven by Calogero's father, Lorenzo. So this is not just something that relates to the characters, practical information, right? What is that? What kind of work does this man do? He drives the bus. No, the bus is symbolic of a theme that is slightly harder to catch, but once I tell you about it, you'll see it through the film. Since the film is about a very small space, really, the coordinates are the stoop, the lamppost at the corner, the bar near the lamppost, across the street, the funeral home, because there will be murders, and there is also a church nearby, a restaurant nearby, a very small place, yet the logic of the community is insiders versus outsiders. So even the bus brings outsiders at least through the neighborhood and possibly into the neighborhood. And by placing Calogero's father Lorenzo in the bus, his role as a mentor, not just a father, but a father figure, a model for Calogero, acquires symbolic value, right? Because Calogero is the mafioso is strongly connected to the place. His idea is availability. I have to be there, I have to catch problems as they arise in this place. And he sees the views through the skewed angle of the mafia business. But Calogero's father is someone who's more in contact with the outside world, and also being on the bus, you can see that is not always present. And of course, you might say it would be like that for every job you give Lorenzo outside of the neighborhood, unless you make it a shopkeeper. But exactly because he's passing through and then you see him leave, you're reminded that as a working father, he's not always there for Calogero, whereas The other father figure in his life, in Calogero's life, the kid, the mafioso, Sonny, is there at the lamppost every time, unless there is trouble. And here is Rosina, Calogero's mother, as you can see, inside the house, right? The women are not outside in large numbers as the men are. And certainly, if the women are out, they're doing something. Whereas if the men are out, they're hanging out and socializing, right? You can see this difference as well. And therefore, you know that it's a community enforcing certain boundaries through practices such as going out. And you see at the beginning of the movie, Calogero coming into the house. He's just being dropped by his father. He was riding the bus with his father. His father says, go into the house, right? Don't stay out, because he's a kid. So he's not supposed to spend too much time hanging out with adults who are in the street. However, he comes in through the door, but then the camera follows Calogero because he's not going upstairs. He's going through another door, going down, to show us that there is an underground passage from the building where Calogero's apartment is and the bar where some of the mafiosi hang out and do business. So there is this hidden connection. And it's nice that it's hidden because, of course, the bar is so close. Even if you walk on the sidewalk, you can get to the bar. It's I don't know, 50 feet, 75 feet away. However, the idea of an underground passage is symbolic. It's symbolic of the fact that even if you live as a kid in the microcosm of the family, you become aware that this family doesn't exist in isolation. It's not an island. It's connected to both the social life of the neighborhood, because the bar is also a regular bar, and the dark side of the social life in the neighborhood. You cannot ignore it, not even as a kid. So he goes there, he peeks into the bar, and this gives, since this is the descriptive premise, gives the director an opportunity to go through the various characters, and then Rating Voice will describe each one of them, who they are, their nickname, their faults, what makes them well known in the neighborhood, and then Rosina comes to grab Calogero, says, we told you shouldn't be here at the bar. And instead of taking him home, she goes out the main door into the street, but Rosina goes to purchase some groceries, and Calogero stays on the stoop, and from there, he does what he does a lot of, spends time looking at Sonny, admiring Sonny's confidence, right? The movie is also about masculinity, the body, and how you express confidence and strength with your body. And in fact, you see the others either admiring themselves or being defensive, and it's Sonny who is more forward acting. And of course, very elegant, because he has to be identified as a made member of the mafia. Then, in the next scene, we see finally Calogero in the house, the family is having lunch, and you see the interaction. You see how Calogero, who's age 10 or so, is about to assert his own adult masculinity. For example, he tries not to eat steak, right? Because by saying no to food, a kid can say, I'm in charge here. He lies when they told him, you went to the bar. You shouldn't go to the bar. He tries to lie to his father and say, no, it's not true. I'm not going there. And he's caught, but he's trying. He's trying to find his place in the world. Other outsiders coming in. And this time, we see what the law of the place is in regards to outsiders. Because this is a peddler, they use the old-fashioned word peddler, someone with a cart and a horse selling vegetables, fruit, etc. His name is Phil, and he comes through the neighborhood, is one of the people who comes to the neighborhood. What kind of treatment does he receive? The kids, including Calogero, go to tease him, steal fruit and vegetable from his cart, give him a hard time. So you see that the law of the land is, if you're an outsider, you can be the target, right? As an outsider, you don't enjoy the same kind of treatment or protection that people inside the neighborhood, living inside the neighborhood, would have. In the next scene, we see the kids imitating the mafiosi at the corner, right? Who am I doing this? Oh, you're Sonny, your whispers, etc. And then another outsider comes through. On the bus, there is a black young person, and of course the other kids become aggressive, verbally abusive. They chase after the bus. They throw something at him because it's near the window. Then they chase after the bus. Calogero stays behind, and we'll see this dynamic repeated at the end of the film, where his friends are more violent in their expression of racism, and Calogero is just passive, tolerating this. And his father calls him back from the house. Don't go chasing the bus, stay on the stoop, and there where the story starts. This is the frame where the actual story starts, right? This is the end of the premise. This is the beginning of the story, because the story has to start with a twist, with something that will propel the narrative forward, right? And so this is him by himself on the stoop. He's looking at the corner, looking at the street, and then this happens right in front of him. Apparently, there are two cars parking. Notice that this one is clearly a Cadillac, maybe both are. And apparently they're fighting about the parking spot. This is one of the crucial elements in the story. A man comes out with a baseball bat, starts first damaging the car, then beating up the driver of the other car, and Sonny intervenes and shoots the man with the bat right in front of the kid's eyes. And then, of course, he's a Machiavellian criminal, right? So he has to assess the context. He has just committed a murder, so he's looking around for eyewitnesses. He's trying to assess his control of this context, the context of this crime. And that's when he sees Calogero and Calogero sees him, but Calogero finally feels seen. He feels somebody. So this is also another moment of growth for the kid, because at this point it's not just any kid in the neighborhood. It's the kid who was there when this momentous event happened, and therefore he established a connection with the leader of the community in a way, the protector of the community in other ways, right? So you see the line, when Sonny looked at me for the first time. And then he continues saying, I felt the result of this. Of course, the people in the apartment, his parents, realize what's just happened. They heard a shot. They go grab him. They take him to the apartment. They try to remedy the situation. And they never tell him what to do, right? They never tell him, don't tell anyone about this. But they suggest this in other ways, right? The mother says, leave it alone to the father. Let's mind our own business, which is an implicit suggestion that what happened outside is not something we should get involved with, right? And this is also, interestingly, this will be the first time that in the film we see more of the apartment. Before we just saw the table, the lunch table. Now we see all kinds of shots around the apartment, because we need to realize at this point that this is a poor family. That only the father is working on a bus driver's salary. So it's not a big apartment. It's a small kitchen. You see the sink on one side. On this side, you'll see the stove. But the bedroom of the parents is on the other side. And they have a small living room. The furniture itself, everything tells you this is poor. But how is this important? Because being poor is also being powerless, right? Not to have the influence derived by wealth, right? And there you see it. Yeah, I was wrong in the location of the stove. It's there, but you see, and the policemen, other people from outside, other outsiders come in. Of course, you cannot treat these outsiders with an aggressive reaction, but you just put your wall up, right? So they're trying to say, no, the kid didn't see anything, has nothing to say, but they cannot continue with this game, right? So the police says, bring your kid outside. And they go out, and that's the scene where you understand about seeing others, being seen by others. Because they come out, and every person who's available in the neighborhood from their own community is out to check what is going on. And they see the two of them, they know they played a role, they have a role in this. And therefore, you have this understanding as a spectator. And you understand that both characters, the father and the kid, know that what they're doing has social implications. It's not just about their family. It's about the power struggles in the neighborhood and the balance of power in the neighborhood. Are you strong enough to accept that power by saying, Sonny, kill this guy? Sonny will go to prison, but does it mean that he relinquishes control over the neighborhood? No, somebody else would come to take his place, right? So how can you do that? You see the dead person there, the priest, you see policemen, you see the shopkeepers outside, you see the people who are curious of different ages. And they come through. It's like a procession, right? They come through the people to get to the bar where the police wants to have this lineup. And one by one, Calogero will have to say, is this the guy who shot? And say, no. And then it comes to Sonny. And this time, Calogero will take a long time, right? Creating suspense. Will the kid say yes, it's him simply because he's a kid and he doesn't understand the repercussion? Or is he getting into adulthood, understanding the complexities of the situation? And so it takes a long time, but then he said, no, it's not him. The police is upset. They say, okay, go out, leave. And they go in. And now the kid, who thinks has done the right thing, needs confirmation from his father. Because again, nobody told him, don't say anything. So he's saying, he's being dragged forcefully up the stairs. And he's saying, I did a good thing, right? To his father. And his father has to reassure him, but I cannot just say, yes, it's a good thing. So they use this formula that later that night makes him cry. Because later that night, Calogero will think about what happened and what his father said. And this is what his father said. Why did you say I did a good thing for a bad man? So his father wants him to understand that it was a good thing because there was no alternative that would not jeopardize the family, but that there is something bad that went on, right? And this is very Machiavellian. This idea that sometimes you're compelled to do things that are not moral, but they're part of the game that you play in the context where you operate, right? Following this, they go for a fun ride for Calogero, because they go all the way to the end of the bus line, which is City Island, a place where they talk, they have ice cream, and his father teaches him about life, right? For example, telling him about wasted talent, that one shouldn't waste his talent. How do you waste your talent? If you don't do the right thing, right? So they come back, and now there is a visual relationship, a connection. Now Sonny, when he looks at Lorenzo and Calogero, there is more of a connection, a different connection, right? And in fact, they both look at each other. And then Whispers comes on the bus and says, okay, to show the appreciation. Of course, they cannot say exactly why, but they say, okay, so we offer you this. Help us with the game of numbers. Because with the game of numbers, one of the key aspects is that you have in each neighborhood, sometime each block, someone collecting the money and the numbers, and then everything is collected and sent to a central location, a hub where the family, the mafia family controlling this game of numbers, will count the money, look at the numbers, and then establishes who needs to be paid the next day. So they tell him, if you just bring this piece of paper with numbers to a location, we'll give you $150 per week. How much would that be in today's money? Do you have an idea? What would be a good multiplier?
$500.
More. About 1,500. The multiplier to use would be 10 per dollar. 1960 compared to the 2020s, if not more. A safe multiplier would be 10. So imagine $1,500 per week, even now, right? What a difference it makes. And of course, Lorenzo says no, then tells everything to the wife. So he has to assert his masculinity, justifying with his wife that this was the correct decision. His wife says, $50 is a lot of money. And it's just numbers. It's just a piece of paper with numbers. Again, just a victimless crime, right? But somebody was killed. So we have this reminder that it was a real crime. There was blood, right? And this is the family of the guy with the baseball bat that was killed. And Calogero feels guilty, goes to confession to confess, I lied about witnessing a murder once. So he says things such as, I ate meat on a Friday, and then I lied about witnessing a murder. And the priest tries to elicit information, details from him, and he says, no, I'm not telling you, Father. And Father says, what? I represent God. And Calogero will say, well, I know your guy, but my guy, Sonny, is pretty powerful as well. So, once again, we see Calogero out, the kid. Somebody comes in to take him to talk to Sonny, and this is where the relationship starts. And Sonny starts teaching him about life. For example, the kid likes baseball, adores Mickey Mantle. And Calogero says, well, who's Mickey Mantle to you? And will he ever do anything to you on your family, right? Which is a more mature view of star athletes. Calogero asks, was the man killed because of the parking lot space, the fight for a parking lot? And Sonny will tell him, when you get older, you'll understand, which is also something that his father always tells him. And by the end, he'll understand. It was not about the parking spot, it was about protecting the man in the Cadillac, the black Cadillac, who was a mafia member, right, ensuring protection for a made man of the mafia, a made member. And part of this growing into adulthood, not only at this point is Calogero frequenting the bar, but he's also acting as a waiter at his young age, playing dice with Sonny in the basement of the bar. And his, by now, second father figure in his life gives him a name, right? So he's Calogero to his father, but C to Sonny. And so he has this duality of father figures, this split life. He gains influence. This time, the next time Phil comes around, Phil will give fruit and vegetable to bring home. Just tell Sonny that I treated you well, right? Through his connection, the kid has gained influence, very Machiavellian. He's making money. His father at the bar tips. His father finds out he has $600 based on another line more than Lorenzo, the father, has in his bank account as savings. But his father is a very stern figure, so the money is returned to Sonny with a confrontation. And in this confrontation, you understand that there is respect, mutual respect, that the mafioso understands that Lorenzo would never push his kid to be a rat, to denounce it to the police. But there is a limit for somebody like Lorenzo. He cannot disrespect Sonny the mafioso, for example, talking him in a certain way. And from the model of The Godfather, this idea that, yes, Sonny is another father figure for the kid, but he doesn't want the kid to go into crime. I tell your son to go to school, to go to college, and later on he will tell the kid, this is my life, it's not your life, this life of crime. Don't get into it, don't end up in jail. Right? And he'll say, I treat that kid like he's my son, and of course he'll say, he's my son, but the following part of the scene is about enforcing this, right? Because Sonny, the mafioso, can use force, but what kind of force can the father, Lorenzo, bring to this fight? Okay, I mean, you can look at these. And whispers even suggest that maybe Lorenzo should be killed, right? You want me to take care of him? As simple as that, right? Meaning he stepped out of boundary or not. And of course, Sonny says no. They go to the racetrack in a scene that is just color. The kids open their own club, a social club, near the corner where the whole story takes place. And they talk about sex, they talk about women, and once again, you have the outsiders coming through multiple times. Black people in cars, for example. And this provokes reactions. We've seen this scene, and before the scene we watched in class actually is when Calogero sees Jane, and he'll fall in love with her, but he understands that she's an outsider. That she's part of this community, which is Webster Avenue, where he cannot venture. He's not welcome for good reason. The father and Sonny nod at each other, look at each other. This is the scene we saw that ends up with the bikers being beat up. And this is where the friends of Calogero become tough guys. They want to purchase a gun. And Sonny, who's always available, comes in because he doesn't want this to happen. Because just having a gun doesn't make you a tough guy. In fact, it brings the attention of the police to the neighborhood. He doesn't want that. He has to protect the neighborhood itself from small criminals with guns. And he's trying to teach about power to this guy, to the kid. Calogero and his father go see a boxing match. Sonny is right by the boxing ring. They're invited. The father says no. He sees Jane again out of school, finds an excuse not to go with his friends, and goes to talk to her, and they agree to go see a movie the next day. He walks her as far as he can, but right around the bridge, he has to stop and go back. Goes back to the social club, and a violent episode of racism happens. They're there shooting the breeze. You have another outsider coming through the neighborhood, but this time there is a violent reaction, an attack by these kids, brutal beating. This is Jane's brother on the ground. Again, Calogero is not actively engaged beating up people, but he's not trying to stop his friends either. He's just trying to, for example, pretending to be there to beat this guy up, but just to say, I'm taking care of him. Go find another black person to beat. And of course, Sonny is not happy and explains why this should not be happening. And when it comes to the relationship with Jane, Calogero asks both Sonny and his father. Sonny's fine with it. His father has more traditional Italian racist, prejudiced view, I think we Italians should marry within our own, that's all. But when he goes to pick up, with Sonny's car, pick up Jane has come with her brother to say, my brother told me what happened, and in fact the brother is saying, you beat me up. And therefore they leave, the date doesn't happen. Calogero returns the car. His father is angry because he borrowed that car. And there is a moment of contrast between the two of them. Then when he goes out, he finds his friends, they want to take him to an action in Webster Avenue. They see that Sonny is around and therefore they drive away. But Sonny has come to threaten and beat up Calogero. And he cannot understand that. And this is when he says, you've been like a father to me, but he has to realize that a mafioso cannot trust anyone. And this is very Machiavellian, right? When you play this game, there is no one you can trust completely. It doesn't matter what they've done for you in the past. Because what happened is that Sonny found a bomb in his car, in the engine compartment, that did not explode. And he thinks that Sonny, who was the last one to use the car, just came up with this Jane date story and took the car to someone who planted the bomb. It's not like that. His father comes out, he's beaten up by Sonny as well, so before the conclusion you have to have a crisis, right? In every kind of film that happens. So the kid joins his friends, they're going to throw Molotov bottles full of gasoline at a shop on Webster Avenue, but Sonny comes in and says to Calogero, come out. Because at this point, there is a clarification. Sonny has realized that the bomb was not placed by Calogero. Calogero has had nothing to do. But this is where he admits that his life is a horrible life, doesn't want that for Calogero, which is also something we will find in The Godfather, right? And in fact, he sees Jane again. They both go to Webster Avenue to stop his friends, save Jane's brother, and by the time they get there, not only they've committed this terrible act of violence, but they got burned themselves. They all died in a fire because they had this car full of gasoline. And so by the time they get there, everything is done, but his friends have died. And he realizes that Sonny saved his life, runs back to him, calls Sonny, and in this scene that you will find, for example, The Godfather Part 2, the sense of longing. I want to celebrate our connection, our friendship, our affection. This will never happen. Because in this crowded bar, there is another kid, and this is the son of the man with the baseball bat who was killed by Sonny, who comes there and shoots Sonny in the head. And the last scene is the funeral, where he realizes what Sonny was telling him, nobody cares, really, in a true, authentic way. He has this last conversation with him, and then the character from the fight at the beginning of the movie, the starting point of the storyline, comes back to explain what happened, to promise his protection. He'll be the mob guy for the neighborhood from now on. And then his father too comes in, saying, thank you for saving my son's life. I didn't hate you, but I didn't like that you made him grow up so fast. And you remember zooming in the small place at the beginning of the film. The film ends with them crossing the street. They get out, come out of the funeral parlor, cross the street. They enter the house, the building of their apartment, and that's the end of the story.